Okay, welcome back. Let's take a few moments and talk about Japan during this age of imperialism. If you remember where we last talked about Japan, the Japanese had basically closed their doors to foreigners. The Tokugawa shogunate, which came into power in the 1500s, they decided in the 1600s that they did not want foreigners in Japan, so they closed the doors. Only one Dutch ship every other year was allowed into Nagasaki, and they pretty rigorously enforced this. Um, During this time period, there was a lot of progress that they made with internally, so it wasn't a stagnation period for them, but it is something that started to highlight some problems, particularly with some growing social and economic inequities that were happening with Japanese society. And also, they saw what was going on across the Sea of Japan and China. They were concerned about the British and other people. But it really wasn't the British that they really needed to worry about. It was the Americans. In 1853, the U.S. Navy sent a force over to Japan to force the Japanese to open their ports. Americans were being shipwrecked near Japan and were being killed or abused. And so the U.S. government wanted to put a stop to this. Um, Americans were granted concessions, and then other Europeans started to come in. But one of the things that the Japanese began to do is to modernize. They saw that they needed to catch up with the rest of the world, and this actually led to the overthrow of the Tokugawa shogunate. There were a group of people that supported the emperor taking control. So in 1867 is called the Meiji Restoration. Uh, Emperor Muchihito, he had support and took over the government and started this process of making Japan look more European, more Western. They developed a government like the German government. They created an educational system, believe it or not, based on the American system. They started to industrialize. They began to implement modern banking procedures. They ended feudalism. And of course, one of the reasons why they were able to do this so quickly is that there is only really one group of people in Japan, the Japanese. There's no other ethnicities, or at least not really in large numbers. So they're homogeneous. And so they have a common culture and a common identity. And so this kind of sped that process up. One of the things the Japanese start to do as a result of this expansion is as they industrialize, they have a need for markets and for resources just like Europeans and the Americans did. And of course, being homogeneous, they identify as Japanese. They have a great deal of pride in being Japanese. And so they want to have colonies and establish prestige just like Europeans and the Americans. Um, they fought a series of wars. We've already mentioned the Sino-Japanese War. The Japanese want to gain control over Korea, and they do make it a protectorate of Japan. And they also get involved with the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War over control of Manchuria. This is the first time that an Asian power has ever defeated a European power, and the Russians were pretty much thrown around. Okay, by this. Um, so you can see that at the end of all of this, Japan is controlling Sakhalin Island, which was owned claimed by the Russians before that. They have access to the Korean Peninsula and make that a protectorate. They actually occupy Taiwan. Back then it was called Formosa. And they exert influence over Manchuria. So they don't actually take it over, but they do have, it's in the Japanese sphere of influence. So they have an empire. Um, Japan is about the size of California to give you a sense of scale. Okay.